Good morning and welcome to healthylife.tv. My name's Paul Bursey. My co-presenter is...
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. If you're here where I am, then it's afternoon time. Warren Conley here, coming to you from Central Europe.
Whereabouts exactly, though?
Oh, whereabouts exactly? Try to pronounce this. Santander in Hungary. That's easy.
All right. Okay. Well, let's get straight into it today. Our subject is Evict emotional eating. So what is emotional eating?
It's eating when you're feeling emotional.
It just means you're eating for reasons other than hunger.
Other than the need for food due to hunger, yes. So
yeah. So as an example, not necessarily emotional eating, but eating, let's say, popcorn at a cinema, because you don't eat popcorn because you're hungry. You eat it because you want it.
Yeah, because you're associated with movies. Yeah,
that's right. That's what we do, isn't it? So, and normally the big, like on the CSI with the scientist on there has a big Coca-Cola. Have you seen that CSI? Not CSI, sorry, NCIS. So,
okay.
Yeah. That's what she lives for. So, big soda. So, why do people emotionally eat? Do you know why?
There's many factors. Some are biological, some are psychological, but there are quite a few factors as to why we emotionally eat.
I think most of them are psychological.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's yes and no, but if you're thinking about, for example, serotonin and the production of serotonin, okay, if you're serotonin, for those folks that are not aware, it's that chemical that's released in the brain that feels like a drug. It gives you that high. So it happens when you train and things like this. But you also, your body gets a craving when it's not. This is why dieting is so difficult for most people, because they cut out those foods that stimulate the serotonin, which gives them the high that helps them to feel good. And then they become attached to that food or those foods and the association of eating when they feel good. And this is when it becomes an emotional thing, and then it's psychological. So the two can be one and the same, or I wouldn't say one and the same, but interlinked very closely.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, I can only, you look at things from your own perspective, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're always right, of course. And I'm talking about me, sorry. But some people will take it when they're sad. Some people take it when they're depressed. Stressed is another one. Lonely and bored. They're the ones that came to mind for me. And or they use it as like food for a reward, which
the reward system, which is built into our subconscious again. So that's psychological. And if you think of rewards, how many places can we associate with the reward factor? You think about, you go back to when you were a baby or an infant in your mother's arms, and you knew that nipple was close by, food was coming, so you started to associate that comfort with food, and being fed, or even if you're being spoon-fed in your mother's arms. When you did well at school, you were rewarded with treats. You got A's at school. I think back to when I used to go to the barber shop or to the dentist. I'd always get given a lollipop. And I'm sure many people can associate with that. Maybe in our age, our generation and older, but the younger generation probably not as much. But that's this is a reality of how we associate with food and comfort, and that's where the emotional part comes into it. So certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. So food can be an escape. It can be soothing. It can distract you from what's bothering you, like the real reason, the root cause of it. And So is emotional eating normal? Is it normal, would you say?
I'd say yes, it is normal. I'd say it's normal, but I would say it's also open for abuse. Okay,
Yeah,
and
it's
very
will be
easily open
sometimes.
for abuse. But I think it's to eat emotionally from time to time. Key phrase, from time to time,
Yeah,
is quite healthy. I think it's normal. It's like you say, when you go to the movie. Andrea and I, we still talk about it. If we ever go to the cinema here, you just don't get the same. But like when we used to go in Dubai, you'd get the best caramel popcorn on the planet.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad I don't go there then. So I'd love caramel. So
Oh man. And I mean, we used to munch on one of those at each our own tub. Now, if we go to the cinemas here now, we share a tub between the two of us because it's not the same. Even if we manage to get caramel somewhere, it's not the same. But it's an association, and yeah, it's there. Definitely.
yeah,
we indulge ourselves, but this is the other thing, is that you ask, is it normal? And people think, they've become conditioned to think that it's not normal, so they get hard up on themselves about it. Yeah. But yeah, it is, if you're doing it once a week or once in a
generally
while.
speaking, as you say, it is normal,
Yeah.
as long as you're only doing it occasionally. So
Yeah.
um, even though one principle of intuitive eating is coping with emotions without food, it's still okay to emotionally eat. We've all done it, or most of us have done it, and probably we'll continue to do it. Again, it's whether it takes over or not. I think that's the thing, and it also
Yeah.
depends what you eat. Um, we're emotional creatures, us humans. Our brain is hardwired to feel a wide range of emotions and complex thoughts. So, we're not simple creatures.
And to add to that conundrum, or that complexity, I should say, is the fact that we're also habitual creatures.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's very easy to get into the habit of emotionally eating. It's very easy,
Yeah, it's funny.
especially if you're lonely. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I put my hands up and say I've been lonely on occasions. But I mean, yeah, and things can be really intense. It could be something that happens outside of you, that
Mm-hmm.
someone else causes. But things can be intense, and we react in different ways. The other thing is being uncomfortable about things. Again, it can always turn to food, and not
Yeah.
necessarily the best food either. So,
But
but
also
sorry.
in saying that as well, Paul. Sorry, just in saying that, you know, I was reading that there's been a study that was conducted on the impact of carbohydrates and fatty acids
Yeah,
in our body.
yeah,
Okay, without tasting. So basically, what they would do is they took the test subjects and they fed them through a tube, so they
right.
didn't
Yeah,
taste the food. Okay, and it was just fatty acids or like saline. Yeah, so for carbohydrates, saline solution and a fatty acid solution. And with the fatty acids, the communication from the stomach to the brain got those people feeling good.
yeah,
Yeah, so they started to feel good about things, even though they bombarded them with music that was either very like neutral in emotion or sad music. Those people typically felt better, they felt happier after having the fatty acids pumped into their stomach. So again, it's impacting those chemicals in the brain, and there's not much you can do about that. But the trick comes where? After the fact. So yeah.
yeah. I mean, look, when as a nutritional practitioner, you start with the digestion first. Always start with the digestion first, and then work outwards. Of course, there are other things you want to look at, but if you can satisfy the body as it should be satisfied, then a lot of the other problems just melt away. And this may be one of them. Who knows? We don't know. But behaviors engage reactions, right? So you'll get the reaction that's linked to the behavior.
Sure, yeah.
as we thought, and especially I go back to drinking too much alcohol.
Okay.
And that's because that's another thing. It doesn't have to be food, does it? You know, we could get stressed and then turn to alcohol or drugs. So you know,
Or even soft drinks. So it doesn't have to be that either. It just could be soft drinks. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not. Look, it's not having a can of Coca-Cola is bad. It's using it every day that's bad.
Yeah.
It's like everything, isn't it? You know, it's yeah.
If you take drugs once, it's not gonna affect you for the rest of your life. But if you're taking drugs every day, well, it's going to affect you for the rest of your life, most likely.
Well, it's like, I mean, personally speaking, I'm totally against drugs. However, I am only me, and some people will go out once a month and do something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's up to them. I'm just saying. And if they can cope with it, well, if they want to do it, well, then that's up to them, isn't it? So
I used to do that. I mean, and I've told you in part about this. You know, when I lived in the UK in the 90s, it was the heyday of the drug scene in the UK, in London especially. And on the weekends, that was part of our life, you know. But I also knew that was it, the weekend and only the weekend. Yeah. But many people couldn't handle that separation. They just couldn't, because they became emotionally attached to that instead of just enjoying the experience at the time, you know. And that was just my reality at that time. But fortunately, I don't have that addictive that addictive tendency.
Yeah.
So those folks that do, they at risk when they start to play games like that.
Yeah, the only thing that I've had, which is could be classed as addiction, and that was in the gym.
Yeah.
I had to go there every day, you know, but maybe because of the feeling that, you know, the hormones,
serotonin.
So
that's my addiction, is training.
Yeah. So nearly everything we do is driven by our emotions, right? Maybe not everything, but nearly everything. Now, I'm not a reactive eater. Okay, I never have been. I'm a proactive eater, which means I love food and I eat. You know, I eat before the problem. So so I will eat whether there's a problem or not. Now, the key is what you eat, you know, and some people's habits, as you say, are habitual. Some people's habits are awful. Some people are okay. Some people are great, and everything in between, you know. And we all need to look at what we're doing. But emotional eating's because I've never suffered from it. I have binge eating. Binge eating doesn't necessarily mean emotional eating.
Yeah, not necessarily.
Just being a greedy person. You know.
Well, and often in cases like that, there is no emotional attachment to it. Yeah, so many people will think, but if you're greedy, there must be an emotional attachment to the food. You know, you want that. No, it's not. Sometimes it's
not necessarily.
For them. For them, it's purely psychological, in the sense that, you know, they're justifying the fact that they're eating like that in any case. So there's no emotional attachment to it. It's justification, and they just eat. You know, and I've seen this many times with binge eating. You know, at big buffet dinners and stuff like that, and luncheons. You go and people just eat for the sake of being able to eat. Yeah.
I mean, there have been times. I have to say, there have been times when I have gorged myself.
Oh yes.
But emotional eating is not a bad thing unless you were to, as I say, make it a habit and eating empty calories all day that had no nutrients in them. And that includes obviously bad trans fats. You know that. And I put down here, I wrote down, the clog has begun. You know, and what about your heart and things like that. So it all depends on habits. But eating is a perfectly acceptable way to cope with intense or uncomfortable emotions, especially frustrations and, you know, when we get stressed at work. Those who work, of course.
Those who work, of course.
Well, yeah. As I said to you before, there were times when I was stressed at work, and I got to the stage when I just said to myself, I can't afford to be stressed anymore. So from that day on, I just cut off. Never stressed again. No, nothing ever bothered me ever again.
It's funny how we can do that sometimes. Eh? It's like the same with me. Like, with soft drinks or fizzy drinks. There was just a day, I remember it, in 1987, when I just made a decision. That's it. I'm never drinking this stuff again for the rest of my life.
I did the same with McDonald's. I said to you, I love McDonald's.
Yeah.
And as I say, I cut it down to once every 3 months. So I thought that was pretty good. I thought, this is where I'll get a little taster. Until I really started going into it. And I went, I can't eat this anymore. Really bad. Really bad. It stays in the system for 2 or 3 days.
And you see, all we're looking for, all our brain is looking for, is that first taste test. That first taster. That's all the brain is looking for. And once you've had that one taste, you don't need to finish the whole burger or drink the whole can of Coke. You may enjoy it, but you don't need to, because once you've tasted it, that's it. The brain's done. As far as the brain's concerned, it's like happy days. And this is why you feel so content. And it's even harder to control. Like you touched on it just now with stress and things like this, and anxiety and so forth. What about exhaustion? I mean, how many people today think that it's cool to burn the candle on both ends? They think it's okay.
I used to do that.
Yeah. We become conditioned to do that again. It's conditioning to think that it's okay to work your ass off, and just work in order to create and be successful.
Because I love work.
Yeah,
I actually do love work.
No, but that's different, because now what's happening is that you're going to notice that your body is not getting exhausted as much as the person sitting next to you who's doing it because they have to do it. You see, there's when you don't have to do it anymore, and you want to do it, then now you don't have to do it. So it just becomes part of who you are. Like it's with training with me. So I try to get my clients to start to become subconsciously conditioned when I'm training with clients, is to stop fighting it all the time. You see, most people, when they start training, they start to fight it. They're fighting against what they think is going to have to be a sacrifice or a long slog ahead to get to where they want their bodies to be, or to feel, or whatever, be able to do. So they start fighting. And I try to tell my clients, no, relax, just breathe and just do it. Don't fight it. And this is the same. This is the same when we are struggling in life. We're trying to fight against life, and we become exhausted. And this is when that emotional eating kicks in as well. So exhaustion is another factor that I don't think many people really talk about too often enough. And if you've ever been exhausted, like truly exhausted, mentally and physically exhausted, you'll eat anything. And I mean literally
We should eat anything as well.
Well, I mean,
depending on what the circumstances are. If you're stuck on a mountain and you're you're going to want to stuff down your face anything you can get your hands on.
If it's a matter of life and death, sure, but most of the time it's not a matter of life and death.
Well, it is. Netflix is on. But I mean, look, the bottom line, and another thing about emotional eating is, if it becomes a habit, the scientists are going to get you. I'm talking about food scientists.
They're going to get you.
They're going to get you, aren't they? Because you're going to, if you've got something like Doritos or something like that you can, once you start eating, you want to eat the whole packet, okay? And you've got the dips and all that, and it just becomes this sort of like the hamster wheel of emotional eating, and you really don't want that.
Perpetual motion, just going and going and going.
Yeah, but it's impulsive. Emotional eating is impulsive. It's hasty. We make rash decisions. We start grabbing food, and it's impetuous. And as long as it's only for a short period of time, you get away with it. But but you need a permanent coping mechanism, right? And as I say, we can help you with that. But that's another thing. But it can be powerful. Yeah, emotionally eating can be powerfully bad and it depends on how often you do it.
Sure.
Now, personally, if I'm emotionally affected by something, which is an event or a wife leaves you or something like that, which is obviously not going to happen anymore, but it did affect me a lot. And but I cope with that by either going to the gym and becoming a gym junkie, and becoming obsessed with training, which is great if you want to shed some excess weight, which I did have at the time. I sort of shed right down to this slim athlete again. And also, with that, I did walking as well. I was not in a good way, but I was in, I remember, and this was addictive as well, walking, regardless of the weather, for miles and miles. Only lasted a few months, but yeah, but it's, I suppose it's another way of coping, isn't it?
Yeah. You know how many people. I'd love to know what this, if they had ever did a study on this globally or anywhere for that matter. But I can just imagine the number of people, because I've seen examples of it and I've heard of examples of it where people have joined a gym after a breakup. Or they've had a divorce or something like that, and they go to a gym, because it's part of the distraction, right? Like you just said. And then what happens? They end up meeting their soulmate. Because there's a commonality there. There's a common thread between them and the person that they meet now, and they're both interested in fitness, perhaps, or there's something. So, and they end up meeting their soulmate, or they join a gym in order to counter emotional eating and weight gain and all that. And same thing happens. They go to a gym, they start to feel good about themselves, and all of a sudden, boom, they meet their soulmate. It's
absolutely, yeah.
But anyway, it's a nice story nonetheless.
It could be.
It could be.
But
I just want to touch on something which I
far away.
I think is also very, very relevant, especially in today's climate. With regards to something like that, is any emotional attachment or connection in our personal lives? This information is out there, and I mean our information is out there on social media, on the internet, on the web. Okay, just the other day, I was watching a newscast. It's one of these open newscast things. It's not the mainstream news, but they were talking about how in the US, and I'm sure they do this elsewhere as well, the companies that deal with helpline companies, the helpline, you text them in or you phone in and you tell them, look, I'm in a bad place, and they're supposed to counsel you through this process and everything like that. They actually sell that information to companies to market to you.
Yeah, data is the what was it?
Is the new currency. Data is the currency. Yeah. And it's a human currency. It's got nothing to do with financial. It's data is the human currency, which is now then translated into financial currency for those people that are using that data against us. So when if you tend to purchase online, and you're purchasing foods online and this online, and you're looking at different things based on your emotional attachment to stuff, that's going to get marketed back to you more and more. So I wanted to bring this up because this just adds to the stress.
Yeah,
this adds to all of that.
There's another thing that here's what you say as well. The old Amazon, the Amazon things.
Okay.
Well,
Amazon is a different. Amazon is that's a whole nother kettle of fish in terms of the rabbit hole that you could go down and relating to information and
I know lots of people have sitting having a conversation about something.
Yeah.
Maybe buying some vitamin C, whatever it may be. Next day they're bombarded on everywhere, Google and Facebook and things like that and whatever, with vitamin C adverts.
I'm one of those people. One of the most classic examples was I was doing a training. I was having a training session with the company, okay, was doing an English education training session with them, and in Hungary, and we were sitting in the conference room, and we were doing our session, and we got talking about relating from the subject in the workbook. We started to digress a little bit, and then we were talking about dreams and what we would like to have, and then I mentioned my dream car. Okay, and one of the girls asked me, she said, "What is that?" And I said, "Okay, let me show you quickly." Took my phone out, I opened up Google, and the first thing that came up, Alfa Romeo Giulia. And I mean, if that's not a clear enough example for anybody, then you'll never notice it for you in your own life personally. But this happens all the time, unfortunately. And people need to be cognizantly or conscious of it, that when we become emotional, we make decisions online especially, and we start to purchase things, or we go looking for stuff. And if it's an emotional attachment to it, then you've got to be very careful, because now you can expect to get bombarded with marketing for that, because they're going to use that against you.
It's brilliant in one way, but frightening in another. But
it is brilliant in one. Of course, it's brilliant.
If you've got an Alexa, right, just say to it, "I love a Bentley." And then you get all these pictures of Bentleys. I think, thank you for that. That's exactly what I wanted. So you can turn it around the other way,
If you know, once you know the knowledge, you understand the motivation behind it, then you can use it to your advantage, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, back to emotional eating, because we're talking about all different things. You could turn the whole thing into a positive emotional eating experience, depending on what you do. Now, do I crunch into the celery, or do I hit the candy? I hit the candy, which I should, So if I was crunching into the celery, it wouldn't be a problem, would it? So, look, even us extrovert energy busters crave a little introverted solitude sometimes. And, and as I say, I enjoy time on my own, and it's time to reflect. And I reflect about food some of the time, and what I'm going to be eating, and it's less and less now that I'm doing any form of emotional eating, if I ever did. So I really do think about what I'm going to eat now. And of course, the other thing is, we talk about cramming stuff on a plate. Get a smaller plate.
Well, also what works in that regard is a blue plate or a blue bowl. Psychologically speaking, the color blue helps to calm you down.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So you tend not to stuff your plate as full.
So absolutely. I mean, look, some of the times when you get your blue plate, and you're putting food on it, but I'm just saying that some of the things that cause emotional eating, and I wanted just to quickly say these four, because they could have some impact on people, and that is hard, exhaustive work, a week at work where you're non-stop on the go. You've got to have breaks. Because everything will go to pot if you don't. And that's what I'd started to do at work. And this is one of the reasons why I was never stressed at work again, because I used to take plenty of breaks.
And when you take those breaks, drink water.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm saying, I didn't smoke, so I had a water break, if you want.
Take water. Yeah, drink water, because water is going to help keep you satiated, so you're not going to your body's not going to start craving.
Yeah, and because the other thing is being strong enough to say to someone, doesn't matter if it's a boss or whatever, I haven't had time to do that. And in fact, when we were doing crime reports at work in the CID, I used to write on the crime sheet, "I've not had time to work on this today." Time and date it. I did it all over the place when I didn't have time, and they can't. What can they do? I've got 20 cases to look at. I'll start with the most important one, and I work my way down. If I don't get there, I don't get there. I'm not going to stress over it. A lot of people used to, I can't deal with this.
Yeah.
It's not the way to go. Whatever you're doing,
You see it happen with kids. Often you see it with kids. They can't finish a task. If they're tight for time, they start freaking out.
Yeah, I know.
And they start to get panicky and things like this because they think they're going to get into trouble or whatever the case may be, is whatever's running through their head. But it happens with kids a lot as well.
Yeah, pick a priority, go with it, stay on it till it's done. That's it.
Yeah,
that's all you ever need to do. And if any boss or anything like that starts to question you, just say that to them. That's my number one priority. I'm staying on it till it's done, and when I've finished, I'll move on to something else. That's
it. Something I read last night, and I've never heard of it before. It was actually here it was not here. It was on LinkedIn. It was about time capping. So instead of doing a to-do list, which most people are overwhelmed with, you do time capping on certain things. So you give yourself this, I will have until this time or this date to finish this on. So you do it on your calendar.
Yeah.
And you give yourself that time to complete a certain task.
Yeah.
And that apparently works for many people much better than doing, to-do lists and task lists and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because you might not think it's attached to emotional eating, but it is.
It is, yeah.
Very much so. And work is one of those big ones. I had a little different approach to that, and you've got to find out what works for you. And that was I stayed on a task till it was done, and that's it. Stayed on a task till it's done, and I used to write that into everything, so that people knew what I was doing. They can't question you, because a lot of the stress comes from what you think, what the boss is going to do if you don't do it. And I don't play that game. We'll refuse to play that game. So, exhausting week's one of them. Fighting with your significant other, whatever that means, whether it's verbal, physical, hopefully not, or whatever. You've got to take a break from that. And don't involve myself in that anymore. Don't go down that route.
There's no need. Yeah.
Not playing that game.
Either it is or it isn't, but that kind of stuff, because that's every time you walk in through the front door and you're expecting something.
Yeah.
We start to expect something, right?
Yeah.
And now you want to start to find something to eat to distract you.
Oh, well, that's not. So it depends what it is. But yeah, no, it is. That's how it starts. So the other thing is studying as well. I don't stress when I study. I've never stressed when I study. I actually enjoy studying. But the reason I enjoy studying is because it's something I really want to do, and I take lots of breaks. And so that's never. Studying's never been. I've always studied well, and sometimes I can read it once and remember it as well, which is helpful.
It's very helpful.
Yeah. So again, I mean, just those three things alone. I said there was four, but there wasn't. There's three. Just those three things alone are reasons why some people turn to emotional eating, and I'm sure there's hundreds of others as well. As I said to you about binging on Netflix, beer, drugs, as we mentioned before. I mean, those are other ways out.
Escapism.
And never, if you've got a challenge, a problem, a hurdle that you need to overcome, face it head on, get it out of the way, first thing in the day, and you'll feel fantastic, right? And you'll go, oh, it wasn't a tenth as bad as I thought it was going to be. And it could be a phone call, it could be anything, couldn't it? Something, and it's normally something you've never done before. If you get stressed out on something you've never done, I can't do that. I'm sure we've all done that at some stage. Don't go down that route. If you can't do it, get some help.
This is why, like, when I'm working with new clients, I prefer to train them in the morning. If I'm training with a client personally.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I like to work with them in the morning, because then that's when they're at their freshest and their most powerful. If it's later on in the day, they don't want to go and do training. They're going to start making excuses and all, because now they're tired. So they're fatigued, mentally, emotionally fatigued, and they'd rather not confront that. and face it and do it. But in the morning, there's no excuses. So yeah.
Yeah. If you're suffering from emotional eating, you need to find new ways of coping. Okay. And that's without the Pringles or the Coca-Cola or whatever. You don't want to go down that route. Even if you stop and have a proper meal, a proper healthy meal, that's fine, because that's not emotional eating then, is it?
No.
Right? Emotional eating is grabbing those things that we shouldn't be eating on a regular basis. So are you in a struggle? I don't know. Only you can answer that. Take stock of the situation and work out ways around it. It's your choice how you cope with things. There
are ways to cope with it. There are ways to help yourself with it.
My way of coping with things, and you can only come from your own experience, is that I used to talk to anyone and everyone until I burnt the problem out. Seriously. And that was my way of dealing with things. But I never reverted to food. But it doesn't mean to say I shouldn't cover it on here,
with emotional eating and talking to people about it, it's not as easy as dealing with work-related issues or other stuff like that. Because with emotional eating, people they shame themselves, they get down on themselves, and then they feel embarrassed about what it is. And the moment they start to notice the weight gaining and all that, they feel even worse about it. And so this is just one key factor here, is just have self-compassion. Be compassionate with yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. There's so many other factors out there that are putting pressure on you. You don't want to be doing that to yourself as well. So just be easy on yourself. Another great thing, a tool I think is very powerful, is just make note. No matter when you're eating, doesn't matter when you're eating and what you're eating, whatever it is, okay, write down how do you feel emotionally in that moment. Because that's gonna don't leave it in your head. Don't think about it and go, oh, okay, yeah. No, because that's just gonna stay in your head, and it's gonna add to all the confusion. Write it down, put it in a diary, put it in a notebook, whatever.
Start a food diary.
Just write it down and get used to writing down every time you eat anything. How do you feel in that moment? What is it that you're putting in your mouth? And just write it down, And when is it? Like, is it in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening? These are very important tools. So use them if you're struggling with emotional eating. And stop modeling. Stop modeling as well. For parents, please remember, you have children that model every activity or every action that you take. And if you start to get emotional and you want to eat when you're emotional, your children are going to do the same thing. And then it's going to be perpetuating like Paul said, that hamster. But now this is going to become generational. And so you want to make sure that if you're an emotional eater and you've got children around you, cut it out.
And here's a classic example. How many times have you seen someone, the one or two of the parents being obese, and you look at the children trailing behind, and they're obese too?
Yeah.
So it's the same with everything else. They do, as you say, model you.
Yeah.
But finding comfort in food is commonplace. We've all done it. We'll all continue to do it. People with emotional eating reach for food several times a week sometimes. And we do it to suppress the feelings, the negative feelings. And we've got to try and shut that out, And again, very, very, very important. So some people look down and they say, where did that belly fat come from? And sometimes it can come from continual emotional eating. And there are some people that do it all the time, But when we deal with it, what we do is investigate the root cause. If you can sort the root cause out, then that's half the battle done, So with that, the only other thing to say is it affects both sexes, by the way, emotional eating, but it is more common in women.
It is.
And I've worked out why. There's several reasons why. One is, oh, you know what a woman's brain's like. So, you know, and that's not their fault, by the way. And that's just the way we don't think about very much.
Yeah.
And that's probably why it's less common in men. You know, we don't need.
Women are more connected to their emotions. They're more.
Yeah, absolutely.
More
we're cold and hard. Yeah, right. We don't need a reason to eat, and we don't care. That's probably why women care more, you know. And as I say, it's important. So, just finishing up, you got anything else you want to say at all, Warren?
No, I'm done. Thanks, man. I'm done. And if you want some help with tools on how you can help yourself to overcome, emotional eating, just reach out to us, and we'll be happy to share some tools with you. Some very practical and easy to follow tools and steps.
Absolutely. Yes, and
it's not that difficult. You just need to know how. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, it is quite simple if you can. I know habits are like chains sometimes, but if we can break those chains and change a few things, maybe half a dozen things at most, maybe 3 things. I don't know. You'll go, oh, that's gone. That's not a problem there. So, okay, with that, we're going to finish off now. So have a fantastic rest of the week, and we'll see you at 11 a.m. UK time next Wednesday, 12 midday Budapest time, for the next instalment of healthylife.tv.
And have an outstanding week until then.
Absolutely. See you all later.